In unity consciousness, a species is able to understand that every aspect of that species, every individuation has the exact same value, merit, and it would be ridiculous to terminate any one aspect of that civilization for whatever reason could come to mind, whether it be for power, for money, for survival even, because in harming another, one is harming simply oneself and the whole. And so this is your desire. You are being proposed with the potential to choose whether or not you will face each subject and circumstance with this archaic form of consciousness, of separation, or to move into what you are desiring, which is unity consciousness. Without the catalyst, or yes, we will discuss this desire, you would not have the choice. Do I react to this from separation, or do I react to this from unity?
Jessicka Pearl, JP Herman, welcome on the show. What are you most excited about right now in your life?
Okay, well, right now in my life, in this now moment, I'm on the show. So I'll have to say that being on the show is pretty exciting. And also so many amazing things that are happening, coming up in general, the energy I'm feeling, the fact that, you know, the weather's getting warmer, at least in the Northern Hemisphere, and that summer's on its way, and so many fun projects and collaborations coming up. It's just wonderful.
Yes, amazing. And I wanted to start off right before we started recording. We talked about the energy of synchronicities. And I feel for the past 3-4 years for you have been a series of synchronicities, going through your 40th birthday all the way to now starting to channel a non-physical entity group. What is that like? What were the synchronicities that led up to this point, to you being right here, right now?
Like, you know, what's funny, and what I've discovered since I've started channeling, is that there's nothing but synchronicity. And that it's not so much that everything isn't always lining up for people. It's that it always is, but we kind of miss it. We're not looking out for, how is this lining up for me? How is this the next perfect thing? And it's really about shifting your perception to start grabbing onto those synchronicities or those things that happen, instead of, you know, our general everyday attitude of taking things for granted. When you shift your viewpoint from like, oh, it's just another normal day, to where is the next miracle coming from? Where is the next, you know, highlighted part of the script that, you know, tells me to go in this new direction? Where is it? And having your eyes open, looking out for it with this curiosity and almost like this investigator's type of magnifying glass, then things really do become, you know, a really fast momentum ball rolling. You can't really slow that down once you start to play with your life and the universe and your energy in that way. So on a personal level, I started channeling, then immediately met people who wanted to, you know about channeling, and then had a group of people that encouraged me to come out publicly, followed by many channeling sessions and a lot of people who were interested in having a back and forth with me, which then led to Vagrein's first book, because all those channeling sessions then were compiled and reorganized, and a really cohesive channeled book came out from those original sessions. In fact, the book itself is just the first 6 months of me channeling, really. Wow. So now we've got another 3.5 years of stuff that I would like to transcribe and bring new books and new information through. And then in my personal life, I have had a lot of challenges. I was separated since the time that I started channeling. I've also had some major health issues. I had breast cancer and a lot of things going on. But even in those challenges, there has been this perfect, you know, oh, this is the perfect path. You get through it, and then you're like, well, the stream was taking me through a rocky part, but now, like, look where we are now. So it's really interesting when you'll start to allow your perspective to shift and see that really the universe is cooperating with you at all times.
Yeah. One of the biggest insights I got just reading through that book is that they say that you are exactly where you need to be.
Yeah.
And I feel like people, maybe younger people, are constantly thinking about their future, thinking about how they're going to build out their career, who they're going to marry, when are they going to meet their soul partner. And we can sort of get caught up into this future loop of thinking, what's next? What's next? What's next? And I know I'm definitely guilty of that. And I know this is regardless of age, regardless of gender. But when you sort of tap into that energy of being exactly where you need to be, do you fall into a sort of energy, or is it just a knowingness beyond you that you're exactly where you need to be?
When you remember, because it isn't ever something that isn't the truth, but when you do remember that this is where you need to be, you know, there's several energies that I would say that come up, right? So first there's like a peace that you can tap into. So that there's this like, oh, okay, so now I can focus on like, you know, self-love, self-acceptance, whatever problem I'm currently facing is teaching me, you know, what I choose to learn from that problem, etc. There's also, you know, deep gratitude to be where you are and go like, okay, now I can, if I'm exactly where I need to be, then I'm allowed to stop and smell the flowers, you know, like I'm allowed to be here. If I am where I need to be, I'm allowed to find out what the fruit is in this particular moment. And then there's this weird thing that I've kind of tapped into my whole life, which is like pre-nostalgia.
Yeah.
Where like you're nostalgic for this now before it's even over, because you're in such a state of appreciation of like whether you're connecting with a friend and like having a great night out, or, you know, you're meeting someone for the first time that you feel like you might have a real good relationship with down the road. You're living the moment and simultaneously already letting it go. And in that, there's like this joy mixed with sadness that, you know, nothing is permanent. It really is all slipping through your fingers at the same time. But that also brings up this level of like appreciation that you just can't have if you're, you know, worried about the future. And I'm a little bit down the road now from being 20. And I have to tell you that like when I was 20, I was also worried about the future, of course. And like, what am I going to do? And what plans am I going to put together? And anything. First of all, everything I had in my head, turns out it was wrong. So like nothing that worked out the way I wanted it or thought it should be. It turned out like that in my evolution, those were no longer my desires or goals or wishes or dreams. And, you know, you'll evolve past your idea of this is what's going to make me happy or this is what's going to make me safe. But also, you know, in retrospect, if I had had the ability to be there when I was there, then I could have maybe had more fun and more joy and just been a richer experience. So there is some level of regret of not having, of having worried as much as maybe I did, or of having planned as much as I did. Yeah. And
going into sort of this relationship that you sort of built with Vagrein, you talk about soul contracts, and a lot of channels that I've spoken to usually say that there is a predetermined contract with that entity group if the vessel is willing to make that connection. So was this a subconscious sort of inclination that you wanted to activate? Because I know it came online since you were very young. You had extrasensory perception, encounters with aliens, a lot of different mystical experiences were going on in your early days, but you shut it down.
Yeah.
At what point did you sort of start that inner whisper of calling back out to the mystical, calling back out to sort of make that connection with other entities and start channeling in the first place?
Okay, well, it's quite funny. So my like spiritual exploration for myself, sort of like the part where you become a spiritual seeker, started when my daughter was born. So that's 12 years ago. Because, you know, the transition from like person to mother, and I know like you're still a person when you're a mother, but it's a very big identity shift. So you lose a lot of your identity and quite a lot of freedom when you have a newborn, because your priority now has, you know, taking care of another human being and their soul and their guidance and everything like that. So it was difficult, and I didn't have time to go down the traditional routes of like getting therapy or whatever, because I had this newborn to deal with, right? So I said, okay,
were you a single mother at that point?
No, I wasn't, but you know, my partner worked all the time, and it was just, you know, I'm home with the baby all the time. And so I said, well, you know, I'm going to check out this meditation thing. And I actually downloaded like the Headspace app. So it's actually quite a technological way of having come into meditation. So I don't know if you know Andy Puttycomb's Headspace app, and that's become a big thing in the meantime. But so that's how I learned to meditate, sitting there with my headphones, listening to like the instructions on the app. And then after that, YouTube. I went to YouTube and I was exploring videos and non-duality and a little bit of channeling.
The whole rabbit hole.
the whole. I
got even into conspiracies.
Yes.
I got into a lot of different things there. On YouTube. Yeah.
Exactly. So, but I didn't want to be weird because I was carrying around that baggage of don't tell anybody, what you're seeing. Don't tell anybody what you're hearing. You're strange. Oh, and like even as a child, sort of in periods where I did hear things and express that to my family, they rushed me off to like a psychiatrist type of thing. So there was like just don't be weird. Don't be weird because being weird is not safe, right? Yeah. And so I didn't want to channel. Yeah. I didn't want to channel at all. And I would have to say that the channeling itself only literally came through on the day I started channeling because there was no desire. In fact, I started channeling on that 40th birthday because I wanted I really felt my relationship with this energy, which I didn't even believe was real.
Your body was moving in the meditation.
My body was moving in meditations. And there was almost like it's not like a hearing, but it's a knowing. So with Vagrein, it's like I know they're around, or not even around because they're non-local, but like I know that bandwidth. It's familiar to me. So I wanted them to go away, like to be honest. Yeah. I wanted them to go away and I wanted to prove like, sorry, you're knocking on the wrong door. I'm not a channel. Like, let's close this chapter once and for all. Like, I'll go along and live my life and do what, at the time I was, I'd taken up my painting again. And so I'm also a painter and wanted to focus on that or, just raising my kids and stuff. And then lo and behold, I sat down to channel, which I didn't even know how you do that. I basically said, okay, universe, if I'm a channel, then channel through me, like with complete disbelief that this could be possible. Went into trance and I had hit record on my phone for a voice recording software. And there was a whole channeled piece there when I woke up. And I just thought, okay, well, I'm tricking myself.
When you re-listened to it, what did you feel? What was going through your mind?
I really did think, well, I'm just so delusional at this point. I'm tricking myself. Like that's clearly just me saying random things that make no sense.
Yeah.
And they did make sense. That's the scarier part. Like
that's the scary part because I read that's in the book. That first transmission that came through, it makes complete sense. It's coherent. It's deep. It's profound. Yeah.
So I ignored it, but I was like, okay, well, let's see. I was also curious. Like, so you can't really. Like more curious, like, am I crazy? Or like, what's like, is this thing real? Because I did believe that like people like Abraham, like Esther Hicks do channel, and I did believe that certain other channels were like bringing through really profound things, whether it's the Law of One or Course in Miracles or Seth books. So I'd read some of that stuff and I was like, wow, this stuff is really cool. But clearly I'm not a channel. Like I'm just a crazy person repeating stuff I heard somewhere or whatever. Okay. But then when I did meet people that were interested in channeling and channeled for them, I realized, oh, actually, this has nothing to do with me. Like, because I can't make up stuff that's resonant for them. I don't know this person well enough to grab out of like my own ideas of people what's relevant to this person. And the first channeled sessions were also had a lot of weird synchronicities in them, like someone would, ask about the number 1111, right? And then we'd hit like stop on the recording at the end of the channeling session and it would be 1111.
You have no idea how many times we end these podcasts on like 111, 12233, and I'm like,
okay.
I don't know.
Yeah. So there was a lot of like hinting to me that actually, hey Jess, you're not smart enough to do this on your own. Like you're just like, I just know I'm not as clever as Vagrein is. So when I really started to say like, oh, actually what they're saying really is like way above my, my level of comprehension of any of these topics or any of these things, or even the people I'm dealing with, and people will come with like very personal problems that if they were talking to me as a human being, there's no way I would even open my mouth for fear of saying the wrong thing. People have had tragedies or people who have like serious illness or people who have had like really traumatic and violent experiences, I don't feel qualified to sort of say anything on those topics as me. But Vagrein has no issue with dealing with anything.
Yeah.
So, that's also a part of why I've allowed myself to have way more faith. And that relationship, like you said, it's a soul contract, and it's just developed over the time, continues to develop.
One of our past guests on the show, she's a poet, Ali Michelle. She mentioned that being weird used to mean a person on the path of their destiny. And Vagrein speaks a lot about destiny, about, aligning with that. And I wanted to hear sort of your perspective as well first to see, is there a destiny? Because a lot of people say, am I really meant to be doing this sort of path and going through this? What is your outlook on destiny?
It's like many things when you get to a certain level of like the veil dissolving or consciousness, that it sort of becomes paradoxical from our perspective. But at least from what Vagrein's shared and what I've, I guess, absorbed and adopted about destiny as a topic is that, yes, we absolutely have a destiny. However, we in each nanosecond are in this current now writing it out for ourselves. So again, it comes back to that wherever you are is exactly the right place for you. And you're now choosing where the next exact right place is for you. But you don't know until the film reel keeps going, which frame you've put in the film until a little bit later. So we're constantly choosing from the infinite potential of all destiny itself. Like destiny is much bigger than my destiny or your destiny. Destiny is almost like an energy in itself of all that is. And we're just filtering through as we go through our lives of like, which one are we going to choose today of all of the destinies?
Yes.
So again, it's a bit paradoxical because it would be much easier if there was like, okay, hey, look, you figured out what your purpose is. You figured out what your goal is. Here's the script. Just do this. And you've fulfilled some sort of requirement to be worthy, right? Because that's what we're looking for when we say, what's my purpose in life? We're kind of looking for be accepted by existence. But the truth is, we couldn't even be here if existence hadn't already given us its stamp of approval. Like, that's just not possible. We're not here by accident.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And just piggybacking off that, they said in the book, choice creates your destiny, and the only true choice is surrendering to destiny. And that's the power of that free will. We have the ability to choose at every single moment where we want to go, what thoughts we want to create in our mind that then creates the purview of our external reality. Yeah. Switching gears for a moment, I would love to see if you're open to sharing your personal experiences in the beginning of your life with ETs. We've had a lot of different guests on the show that talk about their encounter with aliens and what's going on right now with sort of a galactic sort of disclosure that's going on right now in the world. And I think it's only accelerating. They're being shown to more people. They're sort of being implanted more in our consciousness that we're part of a galactic family. What insights did you get when these experiences sort of started happening in your life?
Okay, so I am open to talk about it. I haven't talked about it really publicly very much at all because I haven't gotten around to finding what you're asking for, which is the information that I know wouldn't influence someone else and yet is true enough, right? Because my experience with ETs is that I didn't remember a lot of it till later. So I do remember having experiences as a young child and expressing those immediately, like I said, to my family and stuff like that, and them telling me that it was in my imagination. So when you're a child, you do sort of accept that particular information as true. So I have these experiences, but in the same way my dreams are in my imagination, these experiences are not real. So they're in my imagination, even though in retrospect now, they must have been, or they were, right? So, but then what ends up happening is because of that layer of confusion, I also don't know what's real about ETs or not, even if I've had direct contact. So in terms of like experiences that I had as a kid, the memories that I have of that were actually leaving my home. So I lived in this very long street, and you could see all the way down the street, and it was super long. We were on the corner of 2 streets, so we could see all the way down.
In Canada, in Montreal, Canada, and actually seeing like sort of spacecraft, but in that moment, everything else being frozen. So like the cars were not moving, and I have very vivid like recollection of like the lights on the snow. Sort of like how the snow was illuminated. And that was something that was repeated several times. So like I have that as like, oh, I know I'm familiar with this experience because it's repeated. And I do have memories of climbing out onto, there was like this awning outside my window and shutters, blinds, shutters. So I have memories of physically opening the shutters and climbing out onto this awning. Now that memory couldn't possibly be something that happened in actual daytime living hours, because I clearly would have fallen off the awning and, into the driveway and had like some serious things. Plus, my parents never said, oh, you climbed onto the awning, right? So I have the memory of that. And then I do have memories of being in a room with other children, young people. We all had like uniforms, like white, just like almost like a white, like gas station attendant suit type of thing on top. And we were asked to do things like put these blocks in order in a certain way, or do just like tasks. And a lot of it was like telepathy or telekinesis type of stuff, which obviously, again, I didn't understand until I was much older and came into contact with these things on a cognitive level, Yes.
So, or like reading cards, predicting cards, shapes of cards and stuff like that. And it was like
so
like
they were
school.
sort of teaching you.
It was like a school, just like a school to see. And it's funny when I see things like, was it Stranger Things, right?
Yes.
That freaks the hell out of me because of how similar things like that are to the experiences that I remembered.
Yeah.
Before something like Stranger Things comes into,
and they are kids
existing.
in Stranger Things.
And they are kids in Stranger Things. And I think that whoever's, come up with that part of the script, it's tapping into a collective experience.
Sure.
Of like what we have memory of. Because again, then these memories, even in the children themselves, are delicately altered, let's say.
Yeah.
There was also a medical component or some sort of like doctor type energy of this thing. And it wasn't just like, from what I remember as a kid and like recalled afterwards, it wasn't one species of beings. Like the beings I interacted with were like a bunch of different things, and the bunch of different things had different roles. So like the ones in charge of like the games, what was like considered games or the teaching type of thing, were more humanoid type looking people. And then the medical beings were more like what you would see the Greys are now. Again, I wouldn't at the time have understood, right?
Were there other kids on board with
you?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was like there were so many people.
Wow.
Like there were so many people there, and it was like presented as normal. But also there was a knowing, at least for like the school part of it, of like, oh yeah, I want to be here. The medical part was a little bit like freakier, and like not as like that you didn't want to go and do. But
were they teaching sort of energy healing? Because I know you activated that gift as well, or a different sort of.
I can't remember that specifically, but when I do the energy healing, and when I did start that was like, I don't know. I actually went and did a course on pranic healing with like a teacher, and based on like Master Cho Kok Sui, who's like the pranic healing head teacher guy, and his student, his direct student. And he's teaching me this course, and I'm like, I know all this.
I did this, bro.
Yeah, it's like I've done this. Like, what are we doing? Like, why is this? And it was so surprising because I went into that course again, like not knowing what would be presented, and everything made like, oh yeah, of course that makes perfect sense. Like that's of course that's how you do it. Of course that's what you do. And so it was like very natural to evolve that particular aspect of things, which again was a surprise to me. I didn't know that I could read people's energy and tell them like they need to have rhubarb or whatever, like whatever it is. It's very strange and again, that's another touchy situation because you don't want to give someone medical advice that, you're not a doctor. I don't want to ever, influence someone into a situation where they're not taking care of themselves properly. So I'm always like, see your doctor, and maybe also consider this particular thing if that resonates with you. To be a bit careful about what advice you give.
This is so interesting. Essentially, these intergalactics are creating sort of a school for humanity with the younger children to activate psychic potentials. Is that how you would see that?
It feels like intergenerational. And then I don't know if, again, the information, like the memories I have, I have to just say, like, this is my idea of what I think is going on for me personally. I don't want anyone to take this like this is the fact of what's going on. But then there's also like the hybrid children program, and you have it like even as a child having your genetic material harvested. And I think that's part of what that medical part of things was, and tested and checked to see if this is the direction that was wanting to go in. What I did, the information I did get later on, because I then had like my daughter, which is when a lot of these memories came back. In pregnancy, a lot of the memories came back. And then when I had my son 6 years later, I got, and I also had like a pregnancy in between that like just vanished.
Like a miscarriage.
Yeah, but it was a bit like weird, and the medical system always says like, oh, these things happen. But there's a lot of weird things in terms of like the medical system where you go like, right, but you don't have a scientific explanation for it. So what,
What do you mean by vanished?
So like sometimes a pregnancy will be going along and then there's a heartbeat and whatever, and then there's just not. But it's not like there's like a fetus there that, it's just like the pregnancy ends itself. Wow. But, and that happened both in a pregnancy in between. And then my son was meant to be twins and his brother vanished, and it's literally called vanishing twin syndrome. It's a thing that they don't know why it happens. Yes. Yeah. So anyway, so there, like when I was pregnant with my son, I got more information, and some of the information was that the program that they were doing back in the 80s, they've since changed, because what they didn't realize was that some of the stuff that they did when they thought that the people were like not conscious of it, the emotional consciousness, which is separate from mental consciousness, remains awake. Like whether or not you have surgery and you're under full anesthesia or whatever happens, your emotional body is conscious of everything.
Yeah, our nervous system.
Right. So some of the things that they did, they've now changed the methodology of doing it. And when they're working with people now to sort of like work on a genetic material or whatever, there's more of like a consensual and different way of accessing. So like if you saw in the 50s, like people having like abductions and being probed and then having memories of that was because of a lack of delicacy in understanding that humans are actually really like almost, what would you call it? Like photographic memory on an emotional level.
Wow. So
whatever species these are have now understood, oh, actually, maybe we should do things in a different way, which is why sort of younger generation or younger people involved in some of these programs, we do hear more of like positive experiences with ETs now. We hear of these like really like, oh yeah, and I felt light and I felt this and I felt that, because it's almost like the whole
program
structure,
changed.
the program changed, and like there's less traumatic experiences, because even though the trauma wasn't wanted, we experience it on an emotional level as like I've been abducted and violated or whatever, it's a very different system now, at least from what I was explained later on. Yeah.
Wow, amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
I want to sort of talk about your process putting together these books and channeling the books. Okay. You were tasked to wake up every single day at 4:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
And I hope you are a morning person, because
well, I am now.
Some beings told me wake up at 4:30. I'm like, make that 8:30, please. I live in Spain, so
yeah.
So that process for you, what was it like? Were you aware that a book was coming through? Puzzling it all together, how was that?
Yeah, so I was aware a book was coming through. I had help to transcribe many of the sessions, so there was already there in text format. And what was needed to be done at that time in the morning, and the reason also why it was 4 a.m. is because I had 2 small children, and it was lockdown. And so,
Wow.
yeah, there was no way not to be doing that in the middle of the night, because the rest of the day was like full on human.
They adapted to your schedule. They're like,
Yeah.
we know you have this block of time that you.
That's right. Like, oh, why are you sleeping? What's the point there? So it was really about figuring out what each sentence was talking about, and then cutting it up like almost like a collage and putting it back together. And the most interesting thing was, we're talking about like, it was, I think, about 50, 60 channeling sessions. So 50 or 60 hours of channeled material. That when you went and found like the block about health, right, in one session, which maybe someone asked the question about like the physical body, a session like 6 weeks later would be talking about health again, but it would be like the last sentence of this one flowed directly into the first sentence of the next one. So in terms of what the channeled material was delivering, there was a coherence already. I didn't actually, like in terms of the channeled part of the book, there was nothing ever added in to make it make sense. It was not touched at all. So like you could go back to the original transcripts and search for sentences and see that they were like 6 months apart maybe, you know, or like really not connected, and yet they made perfect sense in the book. So the only way that the book was done, and we're talking about the first book, because the second book was a different format. The only thing in that book was like the parts that I added to sort of explain either my experience with it or give sort of an outline about what like someone was about to read, and dive into it like that. But all the topics are there. Like you got all, you know, you got the big five. You've got like health, you've got money, you've got relationships, you've got, you know, death, and like everything's in there. And again, on almost a superficial level compared to what Vagrein then goes into on deeper, longer rants about particular topics. The second book was literally just spontaneous. They were planned, these sessions, channeled sessions live, done on Insight Timer, the app. They had like events, you could do live events, and those directly transcribed exactly as they were. So, and each of those events was like on a specific topic, like finding balance in your life or what to do in the future. And that works more like an oracle book. Yeah.
There's one that they were going to call a call to change that was put on hold.
Yes.
How is that going? Why was it put on hold?
It's not actually, see, that's the other thing with Vagrein that can drive a human mind crazy, is that
not linear.
Their timing is just their timing. And I have a feeling, talking about synchronicities, I have a feeling that the reason why that book was put on hold was to allow enough time for an audience to form, for the audience for that specific book to form, and maybe for something a little bit more mainstream to actually take it, because the first two books I self-published.
Yeah.
And I'm not a marketing expert, and I'm not someone who's able to kind of go and like say like, yeah, buy. And it's not about that for me. So it doesn't get out as far as something that maybe is published through a renowned editor or publishing house. And you know, there might be something coming up very shortly with a renowned editor or publishing house, that particular book. But that is actually the book that in theory should be next. Also, the interesting thing is like the week before lockdown in Italy, Vagrein was like, this will be our last live session for a little while. And I'm like, what? No, these things are going great, you know? It's like, what's going on? Why? You know, like,
little did we know.
And I was like supposed to take a trip that week, and I was like, oh, it must be because I'm like going traveling or whatever. And it's like, no, no. And they only came back when that original panic and fear subsided.
Yeah.
Which was really interesting to also watch. And if you go back and you read that last session, oh boy, it's like, it's all over that session. They're like, well, it's been nice hanging out with you. We'll be back after this short break from our sponsors.
Our sponsors,
yes.
The pandemic.
Exactly. Yeah. And then that Call to Change book does obviously reference things like the catalyst. Also, right in this now, they've been transmitting to me this, we use the word catalyst a lot. They suggest to me the word catalyst. And recently, in using that word, they've been like offering me. They've been like, how about catapult? And I'm like, I'm not like, I haven't quite received the energy packet of what they're talking about when they say like things catapult you, right? And I'm really excited to hear that particular session come through. I mean, maybe even if you were to ask about it, there would be something
For sure.
come up that explains that a little bit deeper and more concretely. But that Call to Change book is really how to transform the problems in your life into the fuel for your own development and the direction you want to go in. So it's super exciting, like as a topic, as a subject.
Amazing. And I'd love to sort of get this experiential interaction with Vagrein, if that is something that you are open to doing. I know there's a whole process that you'd get into the channeling state. If you want to sort of walk people through sort of your process, and then we'll be here holding the space for you.
Sure. Okay. So the process, I would like to reverse engineer it and figure out exactly how it works. I haven't quite gotten to that point yet, and I'm actually hoping to be able to focus on that in the fall. And maybe if I can figure out how I do it, I can then teach that to other people. Because so many people keep coming up to me like, hey, do you have a course teaching channeling? How do you do it? What happens? Where do you go? And I'm like, I don't know. I really haven't looked into it that deeply. And so that's something that is on the cards, to be able to figure out how to explain, what to do with it. In terms of like how I now, it only takes about 4 or 5 minutes to get into trance state to channel. So I'll just be quiet. You'll see some ticks. Maybe my head will move or something going on with my mouth, weird stuff. And then I just start speaking, and it's Vagrein. So, but the one thing I do know is when I first start getting into trance, I'm using a form of listening that isn't with your ears. It's like the same listening, this is just coming out, the same way you hear your own voice in your head. Yeah. And it's not your ears, like you're clearly not hearing something. That's the sense that I use to access the frequency, which just for the first line of the frequency, I can hear like the voice in my head. Once I allow that to speak through, it's almost like I've given consent to my free will for them to go and run with it for like the hour or whatever it is. So it's a listening and then an allowing. And the allowing is the hard part, not the listening. So
the surrendering.
Yeah, the kind of going like, yeah, that is there for, that's not me. That's not my voice. That's not me thinking I should say that thing. That's actually what's coming through. And, we've gotten into such a habit of working together that it's almost always the same sentence. It's always like, good now, how are you? Like type of, and so like, I should know that like, if I probably could go into trance like that, if I just say good now. But
and they have their outro too, the anai.
Yes.
What does that mean?
I don't know. Don't know. I've looked it up so many times. I think like in one language it's like grandmother, but I'm pretty sure that's not what it means. To me it sounds a lot like Adonai, which is I think Aramaic or Hebrew for God.
Yeah. We can ask them. Do you think?
Yeah. Everyone always says like, oh, we'll ask them, and then they'll give us an answer, and we'll see. And no one ever has yet. So
be the first.
Yeah. So, so I'm happy to do that, to get into trance. Just make sure that we won't be disturbed or anything. Okay. And then, you enjoy asking your questions. And I suppose they will handle the timing of however many they want to answer or whatever. Yes. Okay.
Awesome. Sounds
great. Good. So I'll get comfortable here. And I'll see you afterwards.
See you soon.
Good out to you.
Hello, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
And thank you for having us and for allowing us to speak with your friends through you.
Thank you. We have many directions that we could go to, very multidimensional. What I'm feeling is to close out this topic that we were discussing with Jessie about the programs that ETs have been incubating with humans. To your knowledge, what is the purpose of these programs?
In the storyline that many of you are choosing, there is this interaction with the intergalactic family that you do at times acknowledge, at other times ignore, or perhaps fear, and so put back into a space of forgetting within your consciousness. But you have always had connection and always will have connection with all that is in the form not only of the species on your planet, but there is no difference between the connection that you have, for example, with the marine animals of the deepest depths of your oceans and any other being that could be perceived of as extraterrestrial or off of the surface or sky of your particular experience. And so the interaction that you are having with them is very similar to the interaction that you have with some of the species in your environment. You have spent many generations, in terms of the generations of the species that we are referring to, manipulating or altering or doing what you believe to be is best in order to have certain ends to the experiments and the changes that you are participating in with these species. It is no different in other species environments, except that you believe yourselves to be the highest order in all that is, which is not the case, of course, not only on a physical level, but also on a spiritual level. Your spirit, perhaps, is, yes, the highest order of all that is, but your physical beings are limited in the capacity for their intelligence. In fact, you know this because your computers can calculate faster than you can. And so there are limits to the human mind. There are limits to the human action. You do need to sleep at the end of the day. You do need to eat and drink to survive. And so there are other species who do not have as, we would say, limited, or not limited, because that would imply that having different skills or means would be better than. It is not that it is better than, it is that it is different. And these interactions with you at times have involved in the same way you care for animals, for example, and would like to have from the wolf a dog that is tame. There have been interactions with other species who have interacted with you in similar ways. If you would not see yourself as taming the wolf as a violation of free will, it is the same as not seeing this particular contract that you have with these species as a violation of free will. Of course, you are always in soul contract with anything that occurs, also on a collective or civilization level. And whether or not you like the outcomes or the situation that is in play or existence, it is no different than the evolution of species through natural means, or what you perceive of as natural means. Because at the end of the day, there is actually no such thing as what you call natural in the way of science. Because everything that is in its natural order, including your relationship with any species who in the millennia that what you are calling humans have existed, have had their participation in what they perceive of as aiding your evolution.
I see, I understand. And what would then the untamed human being look like?
You can paragon it, again, back to your wolf and your dog. If you look at a wolf, it has its values, yes, and its purpose and its function in the natural order, but it is more of what you would call an animal than the dog. The dog, yes, is still an animal, but it does have the ability to form connection with other species. It does have the ability to form connection with yourselves and to live in harmony without eating you. And so it is similar to what your what you would consider original human, and it was not even called human at the time. You know this because of your archaeological adventures, but what you would consider perhaps to be the original version before modification would be much far more similar to what you would consider your ancient bonobo or your ancient chimpanzee, not even the modern chimpanzee, but your ancient chimpanzee as a contrast. Keep in mind, please, that even the wild animals on your planet have been genetically altered by your human interference.
Yes.
Because of the use of resources, your elephant that is in existence now is nothing like the elephant that was in existence at the time of what you consider the original human. There has been an evolution of that species as well to evolve to the new conditions of having what you are considering a conscious species roaming the planet.
To understand currently where civilization is at, I would love to get a sort of take on the history of past civilizations. There's been a lot of talk of other civilizations that fell due to many different reasons, and now we are sort of in this call to change. What is your sort of outlook right now on what happened in the past and where we are headed now as this current civilization?
Everything that is occurring on your planet in your civilization is because of a desire for it to be as it is. The outcome of that desire is, at times, for example, if you are seeing disaster, or you are seeing war, or you are seeing issues that are negative, the desire for these manifestations is not directly for the manifestations, but the outcome of having experienced these manifestations, which your current major desire is, yes, of the evolution of your species into a new state of consciousness. You have evolved physically. In fact, your physical evolution has been stunted for quite some time, in that physically you are not going to end up with a brain that is much larger than the one it is for the housing of your body, and the choices that you have made in terms of not allowing yourself to remain resilient to the elements of your planet have forced you into a state of stasis physically in terms of your evolution. Mentally, you are now using external, or what seems to be external aspects like the computer mentioned earlier, to allow your evolution on a mental or on a productivity level to continue. But the new frontier for your evolution is the evolution of consciousness from, yes, what we are proposing as well, which is the difference between, or the move, the transformation, the transmutation of separation consciousness into unity consciousness. In unity consciousness, a species is able to understand that every aspect of that species, every individuation has the exact same value, merit, and it would be ridiculous to terminate any one aspect of that civilization for whatever reason could come to mind, whether it be for power, for money, for survival even. Because in harming another, one is harming simply oneself and the whole. And so this is your desire. You are being proposed with the potential to choose whether or not you will face each subject and circumstance with this archaic form of consciousness, of separation, or to move into what you are desiring, which is unity consciousness. Without the catalyst, or yes, we will discuss this desire to shift this word to catapult, of a conflict or of trouble or of something that you do not prefer, you would not have the choice. Do I react to this from separation, or do I react to this from unity? In a peaceful environment, you are not put to the test as to where to react from. It is only when there is a slight problem or a slight perception of what could be a threat to your individuality that you are proposed with the question, do you choose to remain in separation, or will you choose what you have been calling into your existence? And the direct manifestation of this problem is in order to allow you to transform into that unity conscious awareness.
The energy of excitement. Why is it so important?
The energy of excitement is your indication that you are down the right path, in that you are heading towards the thing that will produce the most positive results for you, and not only you, but all whom you are meant to, or not meant to, but are in potential of serving in this existence.
And we're going through this advancement of our civilization, and we're changing the way that we relate to one another. What exactly is changing in terms of our relationships?
In unity consciousness, there will be the inability to have any of these energies of judgment, of jealousy, of fear, of even perhaps those positive emotions that you believe, like dependence or loyalty, because you will understand that each and every individual that you encounter is of equal importance to you as each and every other. And yes, you will still have relationships. You will still have interaction with perhaps some people more than other people. These will be those with whom you have more tight soul contracts. But you will not give this importance to yourself, to your family unit, to your partnerships, to your friend circle. That is in exclusion to everything else that presents itself in your experience. You will be more often in the moment with whoever you are with, as opposed to thinking that it would be more useful to be somewhere else. Your relationships will evolve to be that of mutual respect, and mutual respect for your differences, not necessarily that you all have to be the same. It is not the case at all. In fact, it is in the celebration of your individuation that you will understand what roles and where you fit into the new formation of this web of individuation in unity.
And why and how is a soul contract created?
Ultimately, a soul contract is created because you are all the one soul. And so it is not possible for there not to be attachment, attention, connection between these two fractals of the same one soul. If you would like to imagine 2 points of light that are connected via a string of light that is then connected to all other strings of light. Of course, as you zoom into this or out of this, you will find that it is all in itself, through its connection, the one white light. But if you were to be able to extract the elements or pieces of it, which is what existence in individuation is. So your human experience is a zooming into this grid and seeing the grid from one perspective. The soul contracts are the ways in which you are connected to the next point of light. But the soul contract itself is also created of light.
Can you go a little bit deeper into that of light?
Yes. Light is all there is, and light is obviously simply a word that is describing a concept. Light is not actually what one perceives of as light. It is simply this word that we feel we can use to help to describe a concept that is better felt than understood. But light is all there is. And it is what creates, what is the ability to create anything that one can see manifest. It is exactly the same, perhaps, and this is an analogy that can be used in many different ways, as the light that shines through the projector. When the light shines through the projector and there is an area of black on the film, the light is blocked and you do not see light on the screen. It does not mean, however, that the black is not made of light. Because it is. It is made of the choice of light to be blocked in that particular area. So, in the same way your binary code can control anything that manifests on a computer level, light would be the one. And the absence of light is not actually the absence of light. It is the off switch, the blocking of it for whatever purpose, which then can create a full stream of code which can do any such thing, including move a turtle around a screen. And that reference is for your older audience. In any case, the light itself is all there is. When we are talking about this situation of soul contract, and that light is what makes up the connectors, what we are meaning is that there have been specific aspects of light that's almost like a sheet of cardboard with a pin poked through it. A stream of light can only go through the pinhole. From one ball of light to another, there is that stream of light, that soul contract, which goes through the pinhole to illuminate a specific theme or exercise or learning that both beings want to participate in and have made a choice to participate in. Then that theme is played out for both beings because it is what they can see from their perception, their perspective of their own specific one aspect of the light. Again, remember that as you zoom out, the cardboard boxes become so minuscule that they no longer have any effect whatsoever on the massiveness of the existence of isness itself.
And I wanted to ask you, what is the major outcome when one is not acting on their inspirations, on their desires, and in many ways in their highest excitement?
First, we will say there is nothing wrong in choosing that. There is no consequence outside of your own experience that will say you are a naughty boy or girl for not acting on your excitement. So please do not feel any pressure when we now deliver the answer, which is your feeling state will not be a pleasant one. And your experience on this planet will not be as delicious and delightful as it could have been. Acting on your inspiration is, if only, the fastest route to a life that satisfies your own preferences, that satisfies your own individual desires, because every time you do act upon your inspiration, you are acting also upon your joy. You are acting also upon your desire. You are acting also upon that thing that makes you uniquely you, your particular way of filtering that light. If you choose, and you may choose, to act in some other way, then that is not of any consequence other than you yourself will feel how that feels. And many of you are choosing something other than your highest excitement because you are still, or would like to, experiment with feeling not so great.
And right now, you mentioned that our experience here is meant to be delicious, delightful, positive. Many people are not feeling that way. And I wanted to ask you, why the souls that chose to come down into human bodies, to incarnate in a human body, why did they choose this time, this period in human history?
We will say that the storyline that you are playing out as a collective in this now is very exciting in that it is new. It is not something that you have seen written down in your past, and therefore many of the beings that have chosen to incarnate in this now are perhaps thrill seekers. They do like adventure films or horrors or mysteries. This is what entertains them. We would also say that it is not that this period of history is any more beneficial or significant than any other period of history. It is simply a choice, a desire to be here in this now. And you know that the population on your planet in this now is higher, of course, than it ever has been. So we would say that all of those of whom you exist in this now are existing in this now, in that your ancestors, it is not that they are not existing and that they chose another time. They are also currently existing in this now, perhaps in different form, or perhaps also in a reincarnated type of form, or in a simultaneous existence as their past form. So it is this storyline that has attracted so many of you. And in this storyline, there are your micro storylines, your personal adventures, your personal experiences, the ability to access what you perceive of as new. But we assure you that when the automobile was first invented, those beings too were delighted and excited. The choice to not be following your inspiration, the choice to not be following your joy, again, is a choice. And why would a being choose this? First, they would choose it because they believe it is safe. We would, unfortunately, have to advise you that none of you will survive being alive. You will all die. And so, to seek out safety by sacrificing your day-to-day experience of joy seems to be a very high launch of the dice. It seems to be a not very good investment with not very good returns. So it is, of course, your free will to be able to choose again to suffer in order to believe that you will have some sort of payoff, There is no payoff for suffering. So, as you are here, we do advise, yes, inspiration. We do advise joy. We also advise and this is part of why so many of you are choosing suffering, because had you not chosen suffering to start with, you would not know the delight of stopping that action that does not serve.
So therefore, suffering is teaching us in many ways as well.
Suffering is allowing you the contrast between suffering and the other option.
And you mentioned that we all die. Our physical bodies will have an end date. How do you view death beyond the physical body, beyond this incarnation?
There is none. When we refer to death, we refer only to the physical body.
And how do you see what goes beyond that?
What goes beyond that is what exists already, what you perceive of existing as in the physical body. There is no change. Your body, yes, your brain is what controls your memories, is what controls your belief of who you are, what you might call ego if you so choose to. So that aspect of you, which is not a high aspect of you, may have less pertinence in your experience as the body, as the brain ceases to continue to remind you that you are limited. As you forget that you are limited, you may forget, yes, your particular station in life or your important things that you did every day that made you who you were. But it does not mean that the essence of who you are changes at all from the time that you reincarnate to the time that you are not. The essence that you are, and we have started to use the phrase, the frequency vibration, the individuated frequency bandwidth that you are, always exists. And this is also why in recent conversations we have talked about being able to access not only spirits if one chooses to, for example, past loved ones, but also to be able to access your own friend via telepathic nature. It is a question of tuning yourself, learning to tune into a specific frequency of a being perhaps that has passed, a being perhaps that has the same frequency. You do know people like this already. You must have friends that remind you of a tree, or remind you of a bird, or remind you of some other thing, because they are very close in their frequency nature to something other than a human at times. You have a recognition of them as a frequency that you can tune into. So death occurs on a physical level. Even the physical level, obviously, is then decomposed into its elements, into its matter frequency. Nothing actually ever disappears. It simply converts into other. So if you are, for example, cremated, your physical vessel will turn into the energy that feeds the fire. If you are buried, your physical vessel will turn into the energy that then feeds the earth eventually. And so on and so forth. So your physical vessel in itself does not also have a complete and finite cessation date. The same way when a hair falls from your head, it is no longer your hair, yes, but it also is your hair.
And in your situation that you're not currently in a physical body, what is that experience like? Do you get to choose being in this non-physical state? And when do we choose to go into bodies as well?
So, the vibrational frequency that we are has no existence outside of the accessing of this vibrational frequency. It is not as if we go and have a cup of tea after this meeting and talk with the other non-physical entities about our day. There is no existence beyond your perception of us. In this channeling, you are in collaboration with the vessel to access this particular frequency bandwidth, which, yes, all of you do have access to, tuning into it on your own, but in this particular fashion, in this manner, is how you've decided to have, in this moment, the game of having access to this frequency. So it would not be the case of us choosing to now have an incarnation. It is almost as if the existence of bandwidth frequency could simultaneously be verb, object, and subject. So we are frequency bandwidth, and we are also the bandwidth that can choose to incarnate, but it would not be the exact same frequency. And it gets complicated perhaps for the mind. In fact, we have not had much success in transmitting this in a way that the vessel can understand or that many can understand, but we simultaneously exist and do not. And physical incarnation itself exists and does not. Because ultimately, even physical incarnation is not real. So matter itself is not anything other than frequency vibrating at a certain speed.
And your work right now with Jessie and the vessel, what would you like your legacy to be, leaving these messages behind for humanity?
We have no preference, but we are a direct response from a request. And the request that is the manifestation, or we are the manifestation of, is this desire to end the suffering, what you have called suffering, of feeling separate from one another. There is not one of you on this planet who has not felt the sensation or the inspiration of, or not inspiration, the emotion of loneliness, or feeling isolated, or feeling inadequate, or feeling like this is not where they belong. This energy is now coming to its extinction, its ending. And so the desire is, if we can no longer live in separation consciousness, if this is not what is working, if this is actually leading to the destruction of the species at a rapid pace, which it is, then what else is there? And the question, what else is there, is the question that we are responding to and that we would leave for you. The knowing that there is an alternative, that there is the ability to live. And the only reason why you guys have this sensation that there is an alternative, but do not believe it yet or actually step into it in action, is because of your fear that if you were to embrace unity consciousness, then it would mean the death of your individuation. You would rather kill your entire species than give up your individuation. We are saying that you do not need to give up the individuation to be that precious point of light in a new consciousness that is unity-based.
Vagrein, thank you so much.
We thank you.
And before we sign off, what is a nine? I mean, we have to get to know this.
Yes. It could be most easily translated to you as all is well. And it is a salutation that encompasses the vibrational energy of that frequency, of that knowingness of all is well. So if we were to say all is well, yes, on a conscious level, you would feel that, but there are limitations to language, to human languages, because of and again, we will now point to the power that you have in your words. If we were to say all is well, we would suddenly be separating all from all that is, because we'd be defining it as something. The word well itself does also imply the other definition of that word. So yes, there is wellness, but the moment you speak of wellness, one can also, in the simultaneous moment, invoke its opposite, which is being unwell, or even the other meaning of a pit that is dug deep into your earth to draw water. So the reason why we have a word, a energy that does not have a specific meaning to you, is because in that word we may transmit that frequency directly to you and have found that you do feel it.
Yes, very much felt. Vagrein, thank you so much. It was an honor and a pleasure to be here with you.
We thank you, and we leave you with the light and the love of 1,000 suns. Anai.
Anai. Welcome back.
Thank you.
How are you feeling?
I sweat a lot in channeling lately, so.
Oh, when I'm sweating my ass off, like. Don't worry.
But otherwise wonderful.
Yes. You said you get energized when you channel.
Yeah.
Okay, that's not the case for some channelers. They
I know.
sometimes feel like a drainage maybe, or
No, I get very energized and not super grounded, so like spacey.
Yeah.
But I've learned that like it's important to ground right after, eat something right after, do some exercise right after, go out and touch a tree right after, like really come back to human. And often it's really convenient because like maybe I'll have to like run out and get my kids right after. There's nothing more grounding than being human.
Go pay your taxes after this.
Well, yeah, exactly. Sort of balance that that energy that kind of can make you go off and just feel really amazing. Like it does feel really good.
Well, we know now a nine, sort of that frequency that they're trying to transmit means all is well.
Yeah.
There was a lot in that session. Were you aware of the conversation?
The nine part, they kind of like woke me half up for. So like they were like, oh, you've been wondering about this for a while. So like this is why we're being so obtuse with that and like not telling you directly what it is. So like that's nice because you know, you forget when you are channeling for a while, or that you can ask direct questions too. Like it just doesn't occur to me to like to interact with them directly sometimes. So it's, you know, it's really nice when someone like asks something that I've been wondering about for ages. You know,
how would you interact directly with them?
Okay, so I can either do like two ways. I can like sort of set my intention, write it down beforehand and like just like repeat the question to myself, and then I'll do a session, and at some point during that session the answer will come out. Like and I don't do it that often, you know. I do it when I have very like specific, like, oh my god, I'm so confused about what to do type of situations, and you know, being what they are, it always comes back to the same answer. So like I don't even do it that often. It's always like, well, you know, the answers are all inside you, and it's your free will and choice, and don't act from a place of fear and stuff like that. So it's really not something I do very often. But for example, if like when I did the Insight Timer sessions, they would transmit to me almost like the theme, because to do that you have to like set up the session a couple weeks before. So you have to give this thing a title. So what would happen is, so I'd be like, is the title like surrender? Like, I don't know. Like, and so like I wouldn't know if they would turn up and like channel on surrendering, right? Yeah. But they always did. So it really is just a question of like, hey, we're channeling on surrender today because you told me 2 weeks ago we were, and they're like, okay, cool. Then like, you know, just wing it. Yeah, so there's that. And then, you know, I can get friends to ask for me, or it's funny when I have some questions sometimes, like personal questions, then I'll have like a group session and someone will ask my question. I didn't even tell it to them. And like, they'll have the exact same issue or the exact same problem. So
in the collective,
yeah. Like I had like a blocked ear for like 3 weeks, ear infections and stuff like that. And I go and have a group session. Like the first question out of the box is like, I've had an ear infection for 3 weeks and I don't know what to do about it, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh my God, this is hilarious. It's so funny. Yeah.
Well, that was incredible. The whole energy is very palpable, very, you know, tangible as well. You can feel the energy coming through with the words. And I'm sure that's how it feels as well for you right after. That's why you feel so energized. I'm very conscious of your time, and we end every podcast with a final trio, very rapid fire questions that you can answer in any way that you want. But before that, I know people are going to be very interested, very curious to learn more about you, where they can get more of Vagrein channeling, more about your work. Where would you send people to go for that?
Okay, so the majority of the information anybody would want is on my website, which is www.jpherman.com, and that's with one N. And then I've got a YouTube channel, so you can just look me up there. If you look up Vagrein, it's really going to be all that comes up. You'll see other podcast interviews and Vagrein. That's what you're going to find. Even if you just put Vagrein, Vagrein in Google, since the word didn't mean anything before they came through,
gave it meaning.
It just that's kind of what pops up. So if anyone gets confused of where to find me, and then I'm also on Instagram. So my main points are like my website, Instagram, and YouTube right now.
Amazing. All right, for the final trio, we have 3 questions. The first 2 are personalized to the guest, and then the last one is one that we ask at the end of every podcast. So the first one is, what is a desire that is existing within you that you want to take action upon right now?
Okay, so it's the same desire since I started channeling, getting this message out to as many people as possible in whatever way that is supposed to happen. So that is like the burn. If there's a burning desire, that's it. And also to not even have to take that much action on it. You know what I mean? Yes. Like there's that like allowing of it to happen. So yeah.
For sure. Amazing. And going off what you mentioned a bit earlier about your relationship with Vagrein, what is one pressing question that you have for them that you'd like to just leave in the collective, in the air?
You know, the first thing that comes to mind is why me? And that comes both from like how does this work? Like, why should this be something special? Like, because I don't really feel like there's anything I've done that's special about it, or even that channeling itself is special or that hard. So like understanding that might help other people have their own direct access to it, because I also don't think you need to go and like become a channel for other people. Having this direct access to this particular energy can be nothing but benefit to anybody, right? Yeah. So is it like something I did or some genetic thing? I don't know what it is. So like the why would this be able to come through in this way? And also from the sort of like same question everybody has, like what is my purpose? Like the why me of like, why is this the road? Why is this my destiny? Or why am I choosing this even, you know? Yeah. So that's what I would leave for them.
Yeah. What comes up when you say that is directly their message of the seeking ends when the sharing begins, and you are completely surrendered to sharing your gifts, this message. And I feel like the more that you share it, the more that you're locked into it, the answers will probably just come up. You'll know like, oh, why me? It's because I'm here to share it.
Yeah.
In a way. The final question, we call it the time capsule question. So it requires us, this is probably easier for Vagrein, but it requires us to travel a bit into the future, 20, 25 years down the line. And basically what the scenario that we're going to put in is that you are given a time capsule. And the purpose of this time capsule is that in 20 years down the line, the next generation of leaders are going to open it. So my generation now in 20 years down the line is going to be in leadership positions all over the world.
Right.
And they're going to open this time capsule, and you can put in anything that you desire within that time capsule that's going to help guide them into this next collective change for humanity. It doesn't have to be something physical. It could be whatever, you know, beyond your imagination that you can fit into an infinite time capsule. But what would you feel are the essentials that you would leave behind as sort of a legacy, a Jessie Herman legacy for the next generations?
Well, again, I think it's really just this message that comes through. The first thought was like, and you know, I don't even want to project distortion. Do you know, my first thought was like, you see? like almost like you open up like a fortune cookie, like, you see, it was fine. You know, like no worries.
All is well.
Exactly, like an eye, right? So so like, you see, you had nothing to worry about. Like, of course it went the way you wanted it to go. Like with all the doubts and the things and the challenges and whatever, like, of course you've arrived 25 years later and like all that stuff that you thought might not happen happened, and it's all good. You know, because there really is so much focus on, and there always has been, like, this is not something new to this generation. There's always been so much focus on like what could go wrong.
Yeah.
And very little focus on action to like, you know, it's like we're able to identify the problem, but not able to identify the action to the solution to this problem that we've almost invented on our own, right? And then, you know, you see this also with like current events, like something happens and it's like, oh, it's a big deal. It's a big deal. It's a big deal. And then like everyone kind of gets bored of the topic. And then it's like, let's like cause some new drama on something else. Right. So, but I think that, you know, this particular generation has the real potential to allow themselves to get very much closer to letting go to this. It's a fixed mentality. Separation is a fixed mentality as well. And it's we need to keep doing things the way they've always been done mentality. That's already shifted. Yeah. That's already shifted just because of the ability for any one individual to really change the collective, right? So everyone who is following their own inner guidance does have huge impact now. You know, in the 1950s, like for you to have any impact at all, you had to know all the right people, position yourself in the right place. And then even then, maybe you couldn't actually act upon your own impact, right?
Yeah.
Now it's like we all have access to everything. So the people who are following their own inner guidance the most are the ones that are going to be able to share that the most and therefore change the collective the most. So I really believe we're already in a good position, and it is a question of just changing consciousness and removing fear. We do have things working against us as well, unfortunately, because we do have that old fixed mentality saying, well, we have to be afraid or we won't survive. But again, that comes back. Guys, you remember Vagrein saying something like, you're not going to get out of this alive. So what's the point in trying, right? Like stop the fear, because there's no point to it.
Powerful.
Yeah.
And on top of this time capsule, you could leave behind a question, a reflective question that whoever opens it can think about, sort of integrate, that is going to open them up in many ways. You can leave behind any question. The
question is, what do you choose?
What do you choose? Powerful. Yeah. Jessie, this has been a beautiful conversation. Thank you so much for opening yourself to the synchronicity that occurred for us to even be here. Yeah. That's a very funny story. But thank you. I really appreciate your mission, and I look forward to continue to support you along the way.
Wonderful. And thank you so much for that support. It really means a lot.
Yes.
All right.
A night.
A night. Have a wonderful day.